For sure. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee of Budget and Tax. We have Senator Jackson here. Senator Selling is on his way. So we can put a tracker out on Senator Rosepep. I'd appreciate it. We have three budgets today: Maryland Tax Court, DPSCS, Office of Administrative Hearings, and then DPSCS Administration and Offices. We're going to start with the Tax Court. Our friend Jacob Polikoff is here. Jacob, take it away.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just for a quick refresher on the Maryland Tax Court, decisions appealed to the Tax Court include those from the Comptroller of Maryland, State Department of Assessments and Taxation after first being heard by the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Boards and local collectors, among others. MTC is composed of 5 judges who are appointed by the governor for 6-year terms. The fiscal 25 budget for the Maryland Tax Court increases by $16,019 or 1.7% to a total of $967,989 as seen on page 1. Moving to page 2, we have Exhibit 1, which shows the overview of the agency's fiscal 25 allowance spending. We'll see that the majority of MTC's fiscal 25 allowance, 93%, is allocated towards personnel spending. That's 90% for regular personnel and another 3% for contractual personnel. The remaining 7% is allocated towards contractual services, supplies, materials, and some other smaller categories. On page 3, we have a breakdown of the proposed budget change, again, which grows 1.7% from the fiscal 24 working appropriation. A couple things I want to highlight include personnel expenses, their reclassification expenses, which rise by about $8,000. And there's increased funding for training courses for judges to the tune of about $10,000. On page 4 of the analysis, we have some personnel data. The tax court's personnel numbers have not changed in the past few years. So they have 9 regular positions and 0.4 contractual positions. And as usual, they have no vacancies at the moment. So they have a necessary number of vacancies at 0 and 0 currently vacant. On page 5, we have the first key observation. And we have a decrease in appeals and clearance rates rising to meet 1 benchmark in fiscal 23, the last year for which numbers are available. There were 742 appeals filed with the tax court in fiscal 23. That was a decrease of 85 appeals from the prior year. The number of appeals continues to remain well below pre-pandemic levels, and clearance rates have returned to pre-pandemic levels. The tax court has multiple benchmarks set for clearance of appeals. According to Managing for Results data, the percentage of appeals to be opened, heard, and closed within 8 months is to be 90%. Now that 90% is for both 8 months and 12 months, so they can see how many cases they're able to close within 8 months, and then how much more they can get done in an additional 4 months, reaching 90% in 12 months. The percentage of cases closed within 12 months was 90%. So they succeeded in that benchmark in fiscal 23, but only 78% of cases were cleared within 8 months. Data regarding the appeal statistics for the tax court is shown in a more expanded way in Exhibit 3 on page 5. And it includes figures before, during, and after the pandemic. The tax court has cited several factors which contribute to the failure to clear 90% of cases within 8 months. Factors include an administrative process that is heavily reliant on paper records, postponements which are requested by litigants in appeal hearings, and a longer than needed time period between the end of an appeal and the issuance of a signed order from a judge, which formally closes the case. MTC's administrative procedures utilize processes recorded on paper, which are later entered by administrative staff into MTC's antiquated database. The database was designed for the tax court by the Department of Planning more than a decade ago and lacks a number of features that a modern database would include, such as a method for the public to file appeals online and capabilities which would make the system more efficient for MTC staff by reducing the need for paper documents. MTC has indicated that statutory changes would be necessary in order for appeals to be filed online. The incorporation of a new database would also potentially lessen MTC's administrative burden, leading to faster processing of appeals and better service for Marylanders who appeal their cases to MTC. The second item is postponements and appeals, again, which are mostly requested by litigants and are only requested by MTC if a judge must reschedule a hearing due to illness or another unforeseen reason. Postponements don't halt the calculation of time an appeal takes from the date of filing to the date of disposition. As such, many cases which include postponements exceed the 8-month and 12-month benchmarks through no fault of MTC. This impact on MTC statistics could be clarified through additional reporting of the number of postponements which last a certain number of days, or the reporting of postponements, the percentage of cases impacted by postponements each year. So we could sort of see, any shortage in reaching the benchmark compared to the number of cases affected by postponements. MTC is also working on decreasing the amount of time following a hearing, settlement, or withdrawal of an appeal for a judge to issue a signed order formally closing the case. This sort of relates to the previously mentioned administrative processes, which MTC is working to shorten because it takes time for paperwork to progress through the agency. The order is not signed often for a number of days after the hearing concludes or the appeal is settled or withdrawn. And every appeal, again, regardless of how they conclude, requires a signed order to be closed. All of these actions are likely to result in resolving these issues are likely to result in considerable progress towards clearing 90% of appeals within 8 months, or identifying why a certain number of cases are not cleared in that time in the event of postponements. MTC should comment on any plans for identifying and implementing a new case management system. And additionally, the tax court should work with the Department of Budget and Management to add metrics regarding appeal postponements to its annual MFR performance measures. On page 7, we'll find that the recommended action is to concur with the governor's allowance, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jacob. I think you're in the all clear. Okay. We can have tax court. Yes. I thought about trying to pronounce your last name, but then I remembered I would probably not do it correctly.
Well, actually, I'll help you, Madam Chair. I'm actually Andrew Berg.
I was going to say, I didn't
I'm
think,
not judge.
I didn't think
Chief
you were.
Judge was nice.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Chair. Good morning, Senator Jackson. As I said, I'm Andrew Berg with the Maryland Tax Court, the clerk of the court. Judge Waziski is actually hearing cases right now, so he's unable to attend. But on behalf of him and the rest of the court, thank you for having us here today. We'd like to obviously thank Jacob Polikow for his thorough analysis of our budget. And you do have my written testimony, but if you have any questions about what Jacob had highlighted or anything along those lines, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, I'll just congratulate you on your 0% vacancy rate.
Thank you.
And based on the number of calls my office has been getting, and I wonder if Senator Jackson's as well, on new tax assessments from SDAT, I would anticipate an uptick pretty soon. Just prepare for that.
We've actually already
Okay.
seen.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and that concludes that hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Office of Administrative Hearings, Jacob again.
I'd point out that you're full of Jacobs on your analysis schedule today. Not me for the whole time, I promise. The Office of Administrative Hearings was established to provide an unbiased and objective forum for contested cases involving state agencies. Its cases originate from approximately 30 agencies that reimburse OAH based on the proportion of time it spends on their cases. Additionally, homeowners who are subject to foreclosure are able to request mediation with an OAH mediator. The operating budget summary on page 1 shows that the fiscal 25 budget increases by $697,574, or 3.7%, to a total of $19.6 million. Unlike most agencies, I'll point out that this agency does not include general funds. They are almost exclusively funded with reimbursable funds. and a small amount of special funds at certain times. On page 2, we have Exhibit 1, which shows the fiscal 25 overview of the agency spending. We see that 85% of the fiscal 25 allowance is allocated towards regular personnel, with the remaining 15% designated towards rent and fixed charges, contractual services, and some other smaller items. The proposed budget change is shown in detail in Exhibit 2 on page 3. Again, the fiscal 25 allowance for OAH grows 3.7% from the fiscal 2024 working appropriation. A couple of things that I want to highlight is a small increase in the turnover rate from 3.25% to 3.36%, which results in about $15,000 coming out of the budget. Some other changes include maintenance contracts for the e-filing system, computer software and computer equipment, a scheduled increase in rent expenses for their office space, and computer equipment to support hybrid hearings and remote work for employees. Also relating to the proposed budget change is a note that I'd like to mention regarding an estimated shortage in the allocation for salaries. The fiscal 2025 allowance should incorporate the impacts of the fiscal 2024 statewide salary adjustments. The allowance for OAH may not account for the entire impact of the salary actions, and as a result, the agency could potentially need more than $150,000 in additional funding. Personnel data can be found on page 4, which shows that OAH does not gain any new positions in the fiscal 2025 allowance. They have a necessary vacancy number of 3.93, and as of December 31st, there were 2 positions vacant, which were 1 administrative law judge and 1 administrative aide. OAH has been able to state that they are in the process of filling both positions. Each of the vacancies has existed for less than 3 months, and OAH does not have a recent history of difficulties with filling any vacancies. On page 5, we have the first key observation, which discusses special education mediations and due process hearings, which have increased recently. In fiscal 2023, the number of special education appeals increased to a level last seen in fiscal 2015. This increased number of appeals is expected to continue to grow in fiscal 2024, as statistics provided by OAH for the first 2 months of fiscal 2024 show a steady caseload without a decline from fiscal 2023. In fiscal 23, the number of mediations scheduled was 354, which represented an increase of 87 from the prior year. The increase in mediations, which occupied less time on OAH's scheduled and due process case hearings, which we'll discuss in a moment, does still represent a significant impact, potential impact on operations, with full data on mediations scheduled and held shown in Exhibit 3 on page 5. And as you'll see, just because mediation is scheduled does not necessarily mean that it is held, as the number of held mediations is lower. As mentioned, due process case hearings have also increased in the last several years. Due process cases represent a significant scheduling commitment, more so than mediations, because each case requires multiple days to be scheduled in advance for pre-hearing conferences, hearings, and then multiple writing days after the hearing for the administrative law judge assigned to the case. If cases are withdrawn or settled before the hearing, it can be difficult for OAH to schedule another case in the time block previously reserved for the removed case. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. The number of due process case pre-hearing conferences scheduled rose from 210 in fiscal 2022 to 307 in fiscal 2023. That's a 46% increase. The number of pre-hearing conferences held increased by more than 50 in fiscal 2023, and the number of hearings held more than doubled in fiscal 2023. This increase is not necessarily caused by the increase in the pre-hearing conferences scheduled and held, as changes in the number of hearings held in prior years has not necessarily been proportionate to pre-hearing conference statistics. Those statistics are shown in greater detail from fiscal 2015 to 2024 in Exhibit 4, which is on page 6. OAH has stated that the increases in conferences scheduled and held has not yet had a harmful impact on agency operations, but the agency is closely monitoring the trend, as it could have a more severe impact if these figures continue to increase. On page 7, we'll talk about an increase in total cases heard with a decrease in average overall case processing time. OAH hears thousands of cases each year, as mentioned, from more than 30 state agencies. And in fiscal 2023, they disposed of 32,819 cases. That's an increase of 4,600 cases from the prior year. This increase in cases represents a return to a typical number of cases disposed of in a year for OAH, partly due to the resolution of an issue in fiscal 2022, which resulted in a delay in motor vehicle administration cases being transmitted to OAH. The majority of cases come from the Department of Human Services, the Department of Health, and MVA, and a breakdown of cases disposed by agency is shown in Exhibit 5, which is again on page 7. In fiscal 23, a number of different case types experienced a decrease in average case processing time, which resulted in the overall decrease in case processing time from 46 days to 45.8 days in fiscal 23. That is a small decrease in the overall average case processing time, but there was a significant decrease in average case processing time in foreclosure cases. These cases are tracked from the date a mediation is requested to the date they're disposed. In fiscal 2021 and 2022, these cases had a significantly longer than normal average processing time due to foreclosure moratoriums implemented during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. After reaching a peak of 203.7 days in fiscal 2022, the average processing time for foreclosure mediations decreased to 56.4 days in fiscal 23, and this is more on par again with pre-pandemic numbers. This average length of time being only slightly higher than in the years immediately preceding the pandemic is a good sign for foreclosure mediations processing times. Exhibit 6 shows the expanded numbers for those processing times on page 8. Lastly, we have the recommended action, which is to concur with the governor's allowance, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jacob. Seeing no questions, Judge Pock, it's good to see you. Please come up.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Jackson. I'm Chief Administrative Law Judge Chung Park of the Office of Administrative Hearings. It has been an honor to serve as the state's third Chief Administrative Law Judge since July 1 of 2020. Also with me today is OAH's Director of Finance and Administration, Denera Harbell. And of course, my management team is sitting behind us to answer any questions if you have any. I would like to thank Office of Administrative Hearings Legislative Analyst Jacob Palika for his thorough analysis. He visited our office twice to meet with me and the members of our management team. I appreciate the time he has taken to learn about our agency and the important work that we do. OAH remains vigilant of its statutorily defined role to provide flexible due process to the citizens of Maryland and has worked tirelessly to provide fair and impartial hearings in a safe, efficient, and timely manner to the people of Maryland who are affected by the actions of many Maryland state agencies. Accessibility and efficiency of our office will remain strong as it continues to ensure diligent due process for all Marylanders. In addition, our office is extremely proud that the final report of the Office of Legislative Audits for the audit conducted for the period of July 3, 2018 through August 31, 2022 resulted in no findings. OAH concurs with the governor's allowance, and I and members of my management team are here and happy to answer any questions committee members might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Judge, for being here. Just a quick question for you. The analysis speaks to the special education mediation case hearings, the increase there. What do you attribute that to? And is it, in some cases there is a shortage that we may be able to help you with, but also in other cases, or a combination of it is that our constituency understand that there is somewhere they can go to have mediations occur. So
This year, I think our mediation resulted in significant number of settlement in the special education area. And I think my Director of Operations, John Roddick, will be able to give you a little bit more detailed answer. John?
Yes, please.
Sure. So the special education cases that
Are
have
we
come
good?
up.
Could you
Sure.
just bring the chair up a little bit?
Thank you. Just because Senator Rosef is watching us from home, and I'm
Oh.
sure will text me questions if he has them, but I want to make sure
Yes.
he hears
So-
as well.
With regard to special education.
Yes.
A person who files a petition can ask for either a mediation
Mhm.
or a due process hearing or both, and we have seen an increase. We've analyzed those numbers and we're not able to pinpoint any one particular cause, but I can say that some of them relate to these pivot to virtual learning. I can also say that some of them have to do with, we're seeing more that have to do with IEEs, independent
Right.
educational evaluations. Other than that, it's really just anecdotal as to why we're seeing an increase. Also, the numbers are cyclical in special education volumes. So we see a higher number in the period May through September each year, particularly as we get closer to the beginning of the school year. So while I'm not able to give a more precise answer as to why the increase, but we do see those virtual learning and the IEE related requests increasing.
Madam Chair, thank you for that. That's quite insightful. And if there's anything that we can do to enhance the knowledge to our constituents that these are available, we'd rather take care of these where they need to be taken care of versus disrupting a school year. And so our students lose more educational opportunities. So I appreciate that. And if you could keep us informed if anything else stands out to you, why these numbers have increased. So thank you.
Thank you very
Madam
much.
Chair.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. We're gonna always continue to monitor the situation, and we try to do it to ensure that all Marylanders get the timely service so that their education is not interrupted.
If I might look at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. And if we don't provide the avenues for a resolution to our families, they'll never step forward. So I appreciate what you all are doing in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Was along the lines of the question I had. You guys, I think, can see maybe some breakdowns in government faster than we might see them. And so if you could always just, don't have to answer today, but if you can just keep us in mind, if you're seeing trends or just things that don't necessarily make sense on behalf of our constituents, I think we would really appreciate that feedback.
Thank you. We will inform you.
Okay.
If there is any urgent situation that require your knowledge.
And I just want to congratulate you on getting your the processing time back down to pre-pandemic levels. We greatly appreciate the effort that your staff took to make sure that happened and make sure our constituents had fast resolutions.
Thank you.
I think that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have DPSCS administration and offices, switching our Jacobs now for Jacob Cash.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Secretary, thank you for your patience. You're more than welcome to come up if you would like with your team.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Jacob Cash, and I'm a budget and policy analyst for the Department of Legislative Services. And today I'll be presenting the budget analysis for the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, Administration and Offices. This unit includes the Executive Office of the Secretary, the Office of the Deputy Secretary for Operations, the Maryland Commission on Correctional Standards, as well as the Inmate Grievance Office. The fiscal 2025 budget is $211.5 million, which is a 6% increase of about $12 million. In this presentation, I'll be going through the performance evaluation, followed by the budget and personnel discussion, then a discussion of major issues, which are summarized on page 2 for your convenience. Beginning with the performance evaluation on page 4, Exhibit 1 shows single-year recidivism rates for releases over the past 7 years. There was a dip due to court processing delays during COVID-19, but the fiscal 2022 release cohort showed sustained reductions in recidivism compared to fiscal 2021 and the pre-pandemic period. Interestingly, prior to the pandemic, mandatory releases, which are those who are released due to diminution credits, had lower recidivism rates than expiration of sentence releases, which are not subject to community supervision when they're released. After the pandemic, though, that trend has flipped, and mandatory releases now have higher recidivism rates than those that were released due to their sentence expiring. That's just an interesting trend that we've picked up on. But Exhibit 2 on page 6 shows the 3-year recidivism breakdown for the fiscal 2020 release cohort. And this is a much more detailed depiction of their life post-release. This differs from that first exhibit not only in the length of time that is looked at, but it also considers where the offender was not returned to state incarceration, but perhaps sentenced to probation or had their community supervision revoked on a technicality. These rates are similar to the fiscal 2019 rates for that cohort, except there has been a reduction in technical violations of probation by about 15%, so that's good to see. Moving on to contraband, I'll point out on page 7, there's information regarding 2 recently indicted criminal conspiracies involving 12 individuals in the first case and 15 individuals in the second case. In the first set of indictments, a nurse contractor was identified as the individual bringing in contraband. And in the second set of indictments, an incarcerated individual was identified as paying outside facilitators to drop contraband onto facility grounds via drone technology. The department has completed a major IT project that implemented a drone detection and mitigation system for prison grounds across the state to avoid situations like those. And that was completed in this past December. Moving on to page 8, Exhibit 3 shows contraband fines made by the K-9 unit, which is one of the administrative units of under the Deputy Secretary of Operations. The driver of overall fines has been Suboxone film, which is highly divisible and concealable, but that has reduced in the past 2 years. A series of anti-contraband mailroom renovations are also underway, which were funded with $3.5 million in 2024. There have also been improvements in the unit's ability to discover contraband during normal operations due to increases in hiring and the canines that they're handling. Exhibit 4 on page 9 breaks down the rates of contraband fines by any means, so not just those that were fined by the K-9 unit, but all contraband found or recovered in facilities. There's a growing trend in weapons, tools for escape, alcohol, and cell phones, but there was an overall drop due to the larger drop in controlled dangerous substances, particularly Suboxone, as well as tobacco. Newly reported this year for the performance evaluation, if I could draw your attention to page 11, Exhibit 6 shows the summary of individuals who participated in programming for the past 5 years. The pandemic greatly affected these participation rates, and that was a concern. The General Assembly requested information on programming participation data in the past last year's JCR that was provided, and now we're seeing this MFR being provided as a summary. Fiscal 2023 figures are at or above pre-pandemic levels when you control them for the average daily population, since these are rate driven. As mentioned in the overview analysis for DPSES, DLS is recommending that committee narrative be adopted, requesting that the annual programming participation and non-participation data be submitted in more detail each year with this MFR submission. Moving on to the budget, the allowance of $211.5 million is broken down in Exhibit 7 on page 13. The Executive Office of the Secretary and units under that office account for about 3/4 of this agency's spending, where about 1/4 goes to the department-wide inmate programs and services provided for under the Deputy Secretary of Operations. Exhibit 8 on page 14 and continuing on to page 15 begins the proposed budget change discussion. The largest increases are for salary increases, as well as positions transferred into the agency from other units of DPSES. And there has also been some IT cost increases for the criminal justice information systems, as well as departmental IT support. But these increases were partially offset by decreases to IT infrastructure funding provided in fiscal 2024. Moving on to personnel, vacancies have greatly improved from 22% to 13% over the course of this past calendar year. Particularly, there were improvements for admin aides, admin officers, admin specialists, and office workers. Exhibit 10 on page 19, Exhibit 9 on page 18 breaks down the vacancies by the subunit of these divisions. There's a higher vacancy rate in the Deputy Secretary of Operations than the Office of the Secretary, but the Office of the Secretary previously had higher vacancy rates. So these show a great significant improvement. Vacancies only increased in 3 of these subunits: the Central Transportation Unit, Substance Abuse Services, and the DSO headquarters. Exhibit 10 on page 19 shows the changes in position counts. There were 21 positions added and 6 positions removed from this agency, and the various classifications are outlined in that exhibit. This overall added $1.4 million in funds to the agency. The first issue I'll be talking about today is regarding the department's progress in finishing major IT development projects. DPSES has been carrying out about 6 major IT projects for at least 4 years, but over 10 in some cases. And of those 6 projects, DPSES has squared away 3 of them: the MAFIS fingerprinting system replacement, an enterprise resource planning tool for the Maryland Correctional Enterprises, as well as the drone detection project I mentioned earlier. Of the 3 remaining projects to be completed, the learning management system replacement for the Police and Correctional Training Commissions does have a contract that was approved in October, and the 2 remaining projects remain behind schedule. Of those 2 remaining projects, there's the electronic patient health record and the computerized criminal history. The EPHR, electronic patient health record, was previously awarded a contract in October of 2020, but the vendor's performance was deficient in several areas, and attempts to rectify those issues were not successful, so that contract was canceled in May of 2022. The department still needs this replacement, and the needs are related to the Duval v. Hogan consent decree, which is actually expiring in June of this year rather than in December of last year, as stated in the analysis. And that information was discovered after this analysis was published. The division for pretrial detention is the division involved in that Duval v. Hogan consent decree, and they are currently in substantial compliance with 18 provisions, and they are non-compliant with 9 and partially compliant with 27 provisions of that consent decree. So there's still significant progress to be made in these next few months if the department is to comply with that consent decree. One of the ways that they could increase their compliance is by implementing the EPHR replacement. And there are ongoing system improvements that they have funded for $2.7 million to help minimize those liabilities and improve compliance with regulations in the meantime. The total project cost is going to be about $21.6 million, and it's tentatively estimated for completion in June of 2027. The computerized criminal history was previously solicited as an on-premises solution in fiscal 2021, but the department decided to switch mid-procurement to a cloud-based solution, which caused several applicants to drop out, and it denied other applicants the chance to apply to that cloud-based RFP. So even though they made an award in November of 2021, that contract award was pulled from consideration so that they could restart the process with a cloud-based solution. That new solicitation was released in fiscal 2023, and last year DPSES provided testimony that they expected an award to be made by June, but that date was not met. And as of now, there has still not been an award made for this RFP. Both of these projects are important technological advancements that DPSES needs to prioritize, as the current systems have countless workarounds and band-aids, as well as disconnections from systems that, if connected to, would make work more efficient and result in improvements in reporting time, accuracy, as well as preventing discrepancies in patient care. The current systems are not really user-friendly, and they pose an obstacle not only to complying with regulations, but to bringing in and retaining new talent who would be the ones using these systems. Furthermore, there's legal requirements to update the electronic patient health record, so this is certainly a priority. The next issue I'll be talking about is the Public Information Act. So DPSES was found to have violated the Public Information Act on 6 occasions. The Maryland PIA Compliance Board was granted new powers in 2022 so that they can now determine if a state agency failed to respond or improperly denied access to public records. Since those powers were expanded, there's been 6 complaints made against DPSES, and the PIA board ruled against DPSES in all 6 of those cases. The results are compiled in Exhibit 11 on page 22. The 6 complaints were for 6 unique situations filed by 5 different individuals. And of the 6 complaints, only 1 complainant had received their requested information prior to making the complaint. All the other complaints resulted in a ruling by the compliance board that DPSES must provide the requested materials, except for one in which there was not enough information to make that determination. In 3 of the rulings, DPSES was required to waive any fees associated with responding to the request. And that marginal cost can range from $0 to a few $1,000s, depending on the amount of time. Furthermore, DPSES is the most complained against state agency. In other complaints heard since July 2022, the Maryland PIA Compliance Board found that the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner did not violate the PIA. The Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services did not violate the PIA, and a complaint made against the Maryland 529 program was moot. The only state agency that the PIA board found violated the PIA was the Maryland Department of the Environment. And there's 2 other complaints against different state agencies that are currently pending. Furthermore, DPSES failed to respond to the compliance board, as well as failed to respond to those complainants. In fact, communication was so lacking that the compliance board requested acknowledgement be provided via email. That DPSES received board communications on 3 separate occasions for 1 case. And DPSES did not provide those acknowledgement emails. DLS is concerned with this lack of communication and the denial of public records when appropriate. And DLS is asking DPSES to comment on efforts to increase transparency, train their records custodians to correctly identify exemptions to the PIA, and avoid complaints being brought to the PIA Compliance Board. Additionally, DLS recommends adding budget bill language restricting $100,000 in general funds pending a written plan to comply with the PIA. And finally, I'd like to talk about private home detention monitoring agencies, or PHDMAs. There's been concern in the past that current regulations are too weak to elicit compliance, and there have been several instances of non-compliance. In other states and the federal government, regulations allow fees to be levied against those violators, but in Maryland, the only recourse is to revoke the PHDMA license outright. PHDMAs are regulated by the Maryland Commission on Correctional Standards, which is within this unit, but MCCS is not typically in the practice of regulating private entities. They primarily make regulations for state and local agencies. And they point out that perhaps the Maryland Insurance Administration or some other state agency may have more experience in this type of work and may be better at sanctioning private companies for compliance. It's also just possible in conclusion that statutory and regulatory changes are needed to hold PHDMAs accountable for following the law. My recommended actions are summarized, or they begin on page 26. The first recommended action is to restrict funds pending that written plan to comply with the PIA. The second recommended action is requesting the annual Justice Reinvestment Act report. The third recommended action is requesting the annual 3-year recidivism report. The fourth recommended action is the MFR data for correctional program participation measures. And the fifth recommended action, as mentioned in the DPSCS overview, is requesting notification when either the correctional or the pretrial medical and mental health care contracts are awarded. There's also an appendix summarizing the department's responses to the Joint Chairman's report from last year on page 29, as well as IT appendices showing details on those two IT projects that I mentioned earlier. But with that, I'd be happy to answer questions that you have, but my presentation's concluded.
Thank you, Jacob. I think we're okay. Madam Secretary, welcome.
Good afternoon, Senator Alford, Senator Jackson. For the record, my name is Carolyn J. Scruggs. I am the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. I have with me today Joseph Sadal, the Deputy Secretary of Administration, Annie Harvey, Deputy Secretary of Operations, Nigel Roberts, my Chief Financial Officer, and behind me, Stanley Lofton, Chief Information Officer, and Earl Edding, Executive Director of our Intel and Investigations Division. As always, we appreciate the ongoing collaboration with the Department of Legislative Services. And again, thank you, Mr. Cash, for your analysis. The analysis requested the department to respond to 1 issue and 5 recommended actions. And as always, before we address the issue and recommended actions, I'd like to say again that I am very proud of the work the department's employees as they continue to uphold the safety and security of our facilities, the health and safety of employees, visitors, and incarcerated individuals. I would like to highlight the work of the department's Intelligence and Investigation Division, the men and women responsible for conducting criminal and administrative investigations into allegations of serious misconduct within the department. This division also serves as the department's liaison with allied federal, state, and local agencies. They provide investigative services and support in a variety of ways. Because of the work of IID, the Security Operations Division, the department's K-9 unit, and the Watch Center, and drone detection programs, overall contraband recoveries, and I'll say it again, overall contraband recoveries have increased steadily over the last 5 years. These units have been able to collectively combat the challenge of new technology attempting to get past our facilities' security protocols. Contraband enters the facilities in a variety of ways, including visitation, mail breaches of our perimeter security, or through the use of unmanned aerial vehicles known as drones. You may be familiar with the IID investigation last year that resulted in 15 individuals indicted for conspiracy to smuggle illegal drugs and other contraband into Roxbury Correctional Institution. At least one of these incidents involved using drones to fly contraband over the secure perimeter of the fence to the facility. IID initiated the investigation and immediately enlisted the assistance of prosecutors with the Office of the Attorney General as the case progressed. The department is appreciative of the strong partnership with the AG's office in our efforts to combat contraband. The department has introduced legislation prohibiting individuals from operating a drone delivering contraband over a correctional facility. It is my hope that you will help us and support that bill. Now moving on to the issues. We were asked to brief the committee on efforts to increase transparency, train records custodians to correctly identify Public Information Act exemptions, and avoid complaints being brought to the Maryland PIA Compliance Board. The department understands the importance of timely responses to PIA requests. The department regrets the mishandling of the PIA requests and has been working to put measures in place that will correct the issue and ensure that this does not happen again. The department has completely overhauled the Office of Constituent Services, hiring a new management system as well as a new manager and supervisor, expanding the office that oversees the PIA process and ensuring strict adherence to the law. The office is now directly housed within the Office of the Secretary. Since the overhaul, we resolved all outstanding PIA requests for calendar year 2023. Some 230 requests have been resolved. The new director and manager of OCS have received training conducted by the Maryland PIA Compliance Board Ombudsman Office. The training focused on the requirements of responding to the requests in accordance with the PIA law. I will add that we have expanded that unit that was originally housed under our communications division, and that unit will now have 7 additional individuals, 4 of which started on yesterday and 1 that will start in 2 weeks. And I'm also happy to say that the experience that we're receiving is that several of those individuals are attorneys that have background in Public Information Act and law. With regards to the recommendations, the department occurs with all of them, and we are happy to answer any questions you have.
Madam Secretary, thank you. Great to see your team here today.
Thank you.
I just want to publicly say that I am pleased at the response of since the off-hearing meeting we've had and the hearings that we've had for the requests that have come from this body as well as others. The response of your team and the collaborative effort that we're working on to walk down the challenges that we have. So I just want to say thank you publicly about that. And again, as at the beginning, we've always said we want to be a partner because at the end of the day, we all have stake in this. So we do appreciate that. I'd ask for, Madam Chair, as you know, I'd ask for information about a couple of matters, and we are in direct contact. So thank you. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'll amplify that. We appreciate that you inherited a lot of things to untangle, and it's going to take a little while. We appreciate your sense of urgency, particularly with the PIA issue. Obviously, our offices hear from constituents who have family members, and I appreciate you being responsive to us, but we also want to make sure you're responsive to the public. So thank you for taking that seriously. I'm really excited about the uptick in participation in programming. We're not yet at pre-pandemic levels. I think the progress is healthy. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you're going to, get those numbers up, particularly around education? I think you know how important that is to this subcommittee, but I'd love to hear your strategy.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So we continue to work along with our education partners, especially in the community. We right now just completed the review with our AG's office of a MOU with the University of Maryland system that will allow us to bring all 12 universities behind the walls. It actually is sitting with the chancellor and his team right now for review. And as soon as they agree to it, then we hope by the fall that we will have all 12 universities behind the walls of our facilities. We've also engaging with other community types of training that can be done. We work through Department of Labor, and we have some 23 trades that we already do, but we're looking at community colleges such as Hagerstown to partner with them for their CDL licenses. So we're bringing those community engagements behind the walls as well. But we are vetting everyone that we bring because we want to make sure that the certificates are nationally accredited and meet national standards.
That's really exciting. And I don't want to give you more homework, but I know our colleagues across the Senate and the House would appreciate maybe better understanding your strategy. And those are all wonderful things. Would it be possible to get that not just your progress and the things in the pipeline, but where you want the department to be in 5 years in terms of the programming and participation? I hate to give you homework, but I just think everybody would love to see that.
No,
Is that
I
possible?
appreciate that homework because that's easy homework.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Moving on to something I think you know is unfortunately close to this district, which is the private homes detention monitoring challenge that we foresee. I've spoken with, let me just back up and say, like Senator Jackson, I greatly appreciate you meeting with us over the interim. This is a particularly thorny issue, but one that is really imperative to public safety. Thank you for meeting with us over the interim. I just spoke with Senator Chair Smith. It looks like he's going to have a work group bill to revive this conversation in a more formal manner. So I just ask you to please work with the chair during session, during the interim, so we can, you know, get our hands around this particular challenge and find some solutions.
Most certainly.
Okay. I think that might be all my questions, Senator Jackson.
Madam Secretary, my office will be in contact with your team. I have a couple of pieces of legislation or language that we're going to be looking at that we're going to need your help with.
Okay.
Regarding one, in particular, one I'll mention now. It should be in drafting, but it deals with our wraparound services, but your insight on what that means when someone is released. So if I have a substance use abuse disorder and when I leave, so we want to make sure that we're not just totally disconnecting. And again, this is something we all have stake in this. And so it's a couple of matters that I'll be in touch with you.
We'll be happy to work with you on that. If you don't know, the department hired 2 months ago a community investment director. And we have her actually working with the community to ensure that those individuals that are currently under our supervision and those that are transitioning back into the community without supervision actually receive the necessary resources and to monitor to make sure that they continue to receive them. We're also really focusing on our youth population to make sure that we don't lose them and they recycle back to us. So we will keep you updated on some of the initiatives that we're doing in that area as well.
No, thank you. That includes, Madam Chair, from my, the substance use, and I'm sure you're talking about this as well, the behavioral health, mental health. Thank you.
That sounds like a really obvious solution to a challenge. Do you have all the resources you need for that program? I mean, that just seems like
it is in its infancy. We have the director in place. We are going to look at the pins that we have to see if we can reclassify anything so that we can start to build the structure under her. But she comes with a very dynamic background. She's worked both for the Baltimore City Police Department as well as the federal government in these capacities. And so we're growing that right now.
Okay. About how many folks re-enter the on a monthly basis? So I'll just pick any metric.
So I can tell you annually, there are about 3,000 in the state of Maryland that enter, and that's across all jurisdictions. With of course, Baltimore City having the highest, about 500 of those individuals go back into Baltimore City.
And or there's this new program, we have one person for all 3,000 of those individuals.
So right now, that one person is developing the plan. That is correct. And what we suspect is that we will grow it regionally, and she will determine what her teams look like regionally, so that we're able to touch each region. So instead of having somebody for each county, we're going to do the regions in that way. Because you have some regions that you may only have one person that goes back. For example, the shore, we only may get 5 or 6 that go back to the shore. But then you have your higher populations in Prince George's County, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City, and Baltimore County. They're the top 4 where we're seeing our population go back.
Okay, that sounds like a really exciting program. Again, I hate to give you the better work you do, the more we want to know about it. Could you put that in writing to the Senate? Because I think a lot of our colleagues would be excited about that and want to work with you on it.
We can definitely do that. We also have some slide presentations that we've already done that we're happy to share with you so that you can see where we're going, and happy to take any ideas that you have as we move forward.
And certainly no one knows our districts better than the senators who represent them. So we'll have ideas for you and partners and community resources to be helpful in that effort. So I think that'd be a really fun homework assignment for all of us.
Great, thank you.
Last question, you in your testimony, and this might be just a timing thing, and I don't want to create more work for everybody than is necessary, but on the healthcare contracts, it's my understanding you anticipate in an ideal world having those before the BPW in March, in an ideal world. So hopefully we don't even need this budget language.
Ideally.
Okay, I do understand, and I completely agree that the BPW, their agendas should be, we passed a law, they should be up the Wednesday before instead of the Friday before now.
I'll double check that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a whole fight. So I hope they are complying with the law, that it's the week before. But I understand, and if, let's keep in close contact if we need to extend or change the language. If you haven't gotten that before BPW in March, we'll work together on that.
Thank you.
Senator Jackson, yeah.
And Madam Chair, that was part of my thanks to them, because we are up to date. Prior to the meeting, we had conversations about that, so we are in touch, so. thanks.
And then I do want to acknowledge that we did meet with Senator Hester this morning. And we are going to document in writing to her the conversations that we've had with her.
I greatly appreciate it, and greatly appreciate you meeting with her. I know you're meeting with Senator Hedelman soon about some of the medicated assisted treatment. I really appreciate you keeping those senators close and keeping them informed.
We will.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Appreciate you
day.
being here.
Bye-bye.
And for folks watching at home, including Senator Rosepep, we are back here on Monday. We're hearing Maryland Energy Administration and Maryland Insurance Administration. I will be here a little bit late. Senator Jackson will be kicking off our meeting Monday, beginning at 1 p.m. Thank you.